second international lecture to the fifth Ilmu International Lecture Series on Applied Linguistics, hosted by the University of Southeastern Philippines Language and Literature Department in coordination with the Language Student Society. And today we are honored to have Dr. Curtis Green-Eneix as our guest speaker. To give you an overview of his academic profile, Dr. Green-Eneix is an assistant professor in the School of Education and English at the University of Nottingham, Ningbo, China. As a critical educational linguist, his work focuses on equitable language education, teacher development, and the interplay between identity and language ideologies. His research has been featured in top journals such as Chinese Journal of Applied Linguistics, English Today, Linguistics and Education, RELC Journal, System, TESOL Journal, TESOL Quarterly, and Urban Education. In addition, he serves as an elected co-editor of TESOL International Association's Applied Linguistics Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, let us warmly welcome Dr. Curtis Green-Eneix, who will be presenting on teaching, believing, becoming, reframing language ideologies, and the formation of multilingual educators across contexts.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Raymond. It's lovely to be here presenting to you all today to share my screen with you all. I'll be doing this talk focusing on language ideologies and teacher education. And so when we consider this talk, there's going to be four parts: the role of language ideologies and teacher education, and TESOL and teacher education, reframing language ideology as a form of praxis, illustrating language ideology as praxis through my TESOL quarterly study, and future directions that the field can begin exploring. So focusing on the first part, when we think about teacher education, we are beginning to see many studies illustrating how teachers hold deficit language ideologies that shapes one's learning, teaching, and use, that as a result begins to form a chasm between students' learning opportunities to varying degrees. This has been illustrated in many studies, such as Sarah Congas' study, who focused on how teachers might be misinterpreting federal policies in the United States when trying to support English language learners who have disabilities. As she found, um, she found that educators thought their beliefs about the respective laws were facts, when reality was they were locally constructed in the walls of their schools, district offices, and intermediate units. So no policy was trickling down from the state or federal government. It was homegrown. And this problem has also been found as language ideologies have been underpinned as what counts as language and as legitimate language use in schooling. Pre-service teachers need to be provided with opportunities to translate their learning toward concrete actions that challenge deficit language ideologies in and out of the classroom. And even within and this has been done through varying ways, with many of the scholars have highlighting how we can begin incorporating World English pedagogy through a critical orientation by implementing it through developing local forms of knowledge, creating alternative forms of culture and knowledge within the classroom, helping students interrogate their ideologies, and helping them value their student voices in their future classrooms. Through this, the whole orientation of critical world Englishes has been to honor what is local within a multilingual and multicultural contexts. Yet, even within my own classroom, I was be teaching TESOL teaching methods, and one of the students in my evaluations said the following: Curtis was great and very enthusiastic. However, even though this is a TESOL required course, I found it completely pointless. And because of this, I tried my best to make it very practical for them to show how it helps their students who might not have English as a first language or as a home language. So in this case, I was wondering what is going on with this? Why is this occurring? And so this is why I um, did a study with it that got published in TESOL Quarterly on the intersectional identities and performed language ideologies, stories of becoming a US K-12 content teacher. If you're interested in this study, you can access the QR link here. But overall, we need to, before delving into this study, we also need to understand kind of what language ideologies are and how I reform it within the study. So language ideologies, there's many views of what it is and what it entails. Silverstein, for example, highlights that it's a set of beliefs about language articulated by users as a rationalization or justification. Judith Irvine and Susan Gall highlighted that it's a form of understanding of linguistic variations that map those understandings onto people, events, and activities that are significant to them, that is often suffused with political and moral issues. Or Paul Kraus-Gredy, who situates ideologies as a form of beliefs, feelings, and conceptions about language structure and use, which often index the political economic interest of individual speakers. That is compounded and localized within context that's multiple, context bound, and necessarily constructed from the sociocultural experience of the speaker. And when we think about these different definitions, they're different orientations of how we can begin researching language ideologies in and out of the field. So Michael Silverstein would be more of an ideology as theory orientation, taking a more neutral stance just to understand what these ideologies are. Ideology as critique is helping teachers, for instance, understand that the way they're doing things might be misguided, um, or ideology as performance is it's something that to be done. But for my study, I situate it as a form of praxis. In praxis, building off of Ferrier, is the reflection of action, and reflection is the source of knowledge and creation. To investigate people's thinking about reality and people's action upon reality, which is praxis. So in this case, I define language ideologies within the study as an active process of interpretation and appropriation where individuals use material practices, like telling a story, to reproduce, either implicitly or explicitly, their beliefs to form and organize an ideology scheme by attaching values, representations, and emotions to their explanations toward these linguistic repertoires, semiotic resources, and their subject positions in a particular context. So in this case, to kind of summarize this, ideologies aren't just in the head. They're engaged with. We engage with most of the ideologies that we encounter day by day through an through an active case of sense making as we navigate and traverse this type ideological terrain while performing or maybe sometimes attempting to perform our beliefs in that situation, thereby producing kind of new forms of knowledge uh, through both reflection and engagement uh, with the ideologies enacted. So, returning to my study in TQ, the aim of the study was to understand the way these language ideologies, along with discourses about teaching and learning and training, come together to shape pre-service teachers' emerging teacher identity and their perceived role in helping multilingual learners. Specifically, I'm just going to focus on one question, that is, what language ideologies emerge from my pre-service teachers' narratives performing their understanding of their essential duties in supporting multilingual learners. This study took place in the United States at Evergreen State University. This is kind of in the Midwest of the United States. And the training that they went, it was a 5-year teacher training program with the central aim to develop deep content knowledge in their respective subject and take courses on the most effective teaching practices. So in this case, I had two participants. However, I'm going to focus on Steve due to time. Steve was a secondary or high school history teacher who had English as his first language and Spanish as his second language, lived on campus. Both parents were well educated and they had uh, they're about middle income. And for the findings, I'm going to skip the pro, the methodology and the analysis. If you'd like me to go into that, I can in after the talk. So what were the findings? What did I find focusing on Stephen? Well, he wanted to support CLD students with but only if they shared a language with him. And specifically two ideologies emerged that I captured: linguistic affiliation and standard academic English. To look at his training real quick, Steve took very few subject matter on how to support culturally and linguistically diverse students or students who come from different linguistic backgrounds. With only one course in particular focusing on the matter. With this course, ED 407, a pseudonym, all the names and everything are pseudonyms, essentially highlighting that the pre-service teachers need to adapt subject matter to learn diversity in quotes. And create these learning opportunities for CLD learners so they can make a sense of the curriculum. Very open case, right? And so when I asked him in the very beginning how he felt about one of the courses he was taking, he said, "Yeah, that's something that I have different thoughts on based on what I'm teaching. It's not as prevalent when you're teaching a language course, but in history, it's something to consider because of the possibility of having a language learner. I know Spanish, I can speak Spanish well, and I think the kinds of setting, if I had someone who spoke Spanish, could make that work. But if it's a language that I don't know, I haven't really considered how I can incorporate that into my course." So in this excerpt, we see him taking on a type of teacher identity already. Um, you can see it in the purple where he says you're teaching a language course. In history, so he's even focusing even further on being a history teacher. And then the ideology starts to emerge after qualifying himself as a teacher, saying, I know Spanish, I can speak Spanish. And I think that kind of setting, if I had someone speak Spanish, I could make that work. So notice that ideologies aren't always I believe, I feel, I think, but it's the way we situate them within the context. Speaking Spanish, right, was something that he valued and that he attached to begin constructing this ideology of linguistic affiliation. And we can start seeing the formation of this in the last line in gold. And going even further later on in the interviews, he said, I think that as a teacher, you should support your students. We see this identity come in, where now we're also seeing the ideologies he's attaching to this identity that he's beginning to construct for himself. And even from there, we see this identity reemerge even again as a history teacher, where he's torn between teaching history and teaching students, where we see the ideology again and the tension being played out. And at the last part, we see this level of emotion where he's anxious, where he's attaching emotions that drive his uncertainty and stress in ways. Um, and so after taking this course called ENL 302, which is Methods of Second and Foreign Language Teaching, I was not the teacher of this course. Uh, the course objectives was to demonstrate in-depth pedagogical content knowledge and intersects English language development and disciplinary content knowledge, and help students like Stephen develop lessons that represent differentiated instruction, or helping support their language learners through modified materials. And within this course, it focused on SIOP, or Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. which is a means to making content comprehensible for English learners through English medium instruction. And throughout the course, he took focus on, teacher identity in the content classroom, understanding the policies, and then developing pedagogical skills. This would go on for about 15 weeks, where he also focused on understanding the potential background of learners and material development. And so after all of this, he still kind of had this linguistic affiliation ideology, where he says, I think it's definitely helpful to learn language, but we see this class being helpful to help him see a different way, because he's been engaging with himself as a teacher, as this course allowed him to engage in reflection in relation to the content being taught. And he says, this class doesn't make it seem like you need to learn another language. It teaches a lot of methods that you can use to help English language learners, even if you don't speak their language. So we see in the beginning, before taking this course, he thought he had to share a language with his learners. So that in this case, because he spoke Spanish and English, he could only support Spanish speakers, and all the other students he wasn't able to really support. But as he saw with this course, he was starting to reflect and engage in those beliefs he initially had and see that, okay, I can support my students. And this might be one way of doing it. Yet, even after all of this, he still asked me the following question. And some other data points I highlighted in TQ that I won't delve into at this point. But he highlighted that, do I still teach standard English? Even though this course helped him see that no, you don't need to teach standard English to your students as long as you're helping them learn English through the content, it's all good. Um, still see him ask this question: to what extent do I teach standard English? What about the grammatical forms and functions? So what we're seeing here, to summarize, is that we see that within ESU, this university, TESOL related courses were supplementary and Stephen was left unsure on how to support CLD students within their classroom. Uh, and in this way, linguistic affiliation ideology appears to be a way to absolve teachers like Stephen of the responsibility to support multilingual students in his classroom. And standard English often took place as a way, if any, to teach it because there has to be a right form of English. Um, and in this case, learning a second language like Stephen has, or the best methods, strategies, and theories is not enough to disrupt or combat monolingual or standard English ideologies. Because as we saw, Stephen was bilingual, but reverted to monolingual ideals even after taking this course. So, what does this all mean for us? Couple, there needs to be, as we are training our future teachers, or even as we are become future teachers, we need to actively engage in reflection on our experiences and ideologies to begin forming new knowledge, behaviors, or insights. In this case, for teacher educators, we need to assist learners in understanding their experiences and in relation to what they're learning and who they're learning about in their classroom. And for this reason, we need to further explore the use of activities that spur critical reflection. This could be in the form of guided reflective logs or vignettes where students have to engage in story-like problems that have no clear answer, but they do have to make these context-focused bridges where they are translating or they're developing knowledge with their own ideas of becoming a teacher. So to conclude, the key points is language ideologies not only impact how we provide learning opportunities to learners, but also the way we learn to engage with and appropriate policies in our classroom. Language ideologies are not simply in our head, but they're an active process of interpretation and appropriation. And there needs to be more activities that spur critical reflection in order to help translate developing knowledge into their developing identities. Thank you. This is the article if you would like to delve further into it. Is there any questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Green-Eneix. We'll now open the floor for your questions, everyone. And this will be moderated by Miss Darlene Lames, USEP instructor.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Dr. Curtis. Thank you for that enlightening lecture, sir. So we now open the floor for questions. If you have any queries, please drop them in the Zoom chat or simply raise your hand to be acknowledged. All right, we have here Roble Erica from Baelal1. So kindly unmute your microphone.
Good morning, Dr. Green-Eneix. It's a pleasure to have you as our lecturer for today's lecture series. And you know what? I have learned so much from you with the discussion so far. And it's kind of close in our perspective as well with we are still learning about language acquisition. And I'm also trying to connect the experiences that we had in learning a foreign language along with the things that you have discussed. At the same time, earlier I was also like thinking about one of the main problems that we have here in the Philippine education setting, wherein students are struggling to write in English because they're having like trouble understanding it in the way that they can comprehend it in their own local language. There's just so much to unpack regarding this discussion that or the lecture that you have with us right now. So I think I would like to reduce this to like just one question, one or two questions maybe. And this has to do with the first thing is if I'm going to be like a teacher who is going to teach another language to my students who could barely just understand their local language. Say for instance, I'm going to teach either English or like Spanish or Chinese as their second or foreign language. How am I supposed to approach them in a way that they can be able to bridge the foreign language that they are learning alongside with the local language that they already are familiar with?
That's a great question. And one of the first things to consider as your teacher is one, what is your teaching philosophy? And also, what are the language policies that are kind of dictating how you have to teach, right? I'm in an English medium instruction that says I just have to teach in English. No other languages should be used. But in saying this, I can still create opportunities where my students can use their languages. So if we had to think about it, students have multiple languages, right? They have more than one linguistic hand to help them. So as we're helping our students learn another language, we can help them build bridges where they are able to use it, but we can use the target language so they can engage in it. So helping them facilitate that process of building those language bridges for them. So this might be using or helping them when you have an activity, incorporating having writing it in the target language and then having them, how would you define that in your language, in your home language, or in a language that you have, or so providing those opportunities throughout it, right? So this is one possibility. This is, I believe, Lee Wei and other scholars in this space would call this translanguaging, right? But I would say this is meaningful and uh, translanguaging, where it's not just a random act, it is intentional and facilitated, right? So I hope that does help. And, I don't know the context a whole well in the Philippines, but I will say that, um, with Tagalog and all the other languages there, use all the linguistic you can have, or at bare minimum, allow your learners to be able to play with language. Maybe that means drawing, making those mental connections, right? With language. And I hope that helps. But, just engage with how you view language in your classroom and how you can engage with the policy where you're following it for your school, just enough that you're following it, but you're still creating opportunities to learn.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Dr. Green-Enix, especially in my experience as well. I'm approaching language teaching over to my classmates in a way that they can be able to bridge it with what is the sentence in Spanish and what it translates into English. Although I am also looking forward that this same ideology, apart from breaking the stereotypes with the prejudice that we have between the local language speakers and those who are proficient in English, we can be able to provide the teachers themselves the correct way of teaching language, especially it. I was just thinking right now, about teaching Filipino to English. Ironically, what happened in a lot of cases here is that students are struggling more in Filipino than they do struggle in English. And I think that also the emergence of social media and the age of internet also contributed to it. But yeah, I really appreciate that kind of approach that, as you said, Dr. Greenix. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Just let your students use both their hands.
Thank you so much, Erica and Dr. Curtius, for answering her question. And now let's move on to another student. We have here Mr. Kevin Flores.
Uh, good morning, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah. It was a very nice lecture, no? As you said earlier, you think that TESOL is pointless, right? It's not a good measurement
I
for capabilities in
I don't
English.
think it's pointless. I think it's more of we have to be more cognizant of how we're training our
Mhm.
teachers and the ideologies that they're engaging. So if
Mhm.
anything, you training wise, it needs to be not just a single class. It needs to be, if we're training TESOL teachers, it needs to be more than just a single class. It needs to be throughout their training,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, exactly. So if TESOL is not, I guess, sufficient for this type of being an instrument of measurement, here in the Philippines, second language teachers, there are a bunch of people who aspire to be second language teachers, especially through online teaching. And one of the qualifications before you get into those is TESOL. And if you think that TESOL is not the best unit of measurement for, wanting to teach students for other languages in other places. So, like, what is a good substitution, or what other tool or what are other techniques in general do you recommend for teachers or for employers who are looking for second language teachers instead of just TESOL?
Um, so to go off of your question, TESOL programs, right? So this student was an undergraduate who had to become a teacher first and then learn to support uh, students from other languages. So the main highlight here is TESOL is still good. I'm not necessarily knocking it, right? But what I'm saying is we need to make sure that our training isn't just captured in a single course. And to answer your question, what other aspects should we consider? We can also consider additional trainings that's provided by like uh, plugging in my school, the University of Nottingham Ningbo, or I'm sure plenty of schools in the Philippines provide additional professional development trainings for teachers to help teachers kind of learn maybe how we can further support students, but also these trainings need to be coupled with reflecting on our beliefs, not only about the policies that might be prevalent at your school, but also the way you view language in your classroom. So that way we can begin having a conversation of how we can support these learners through culturally and sustainable pedagogies. So that way, incorporating a critical world English approach, right? So I do think that would be a good way of saying, we should have this training, but we can also provide further training, or We can do a CELTA Delta if you're looking for alternative degrees that focus on it and say, I have this, but I still need to critically engage with those trainings. I think that's the main and central point to take from my talk is training with the teaching approaches are good. It just needs to be a little bit more stretched out in programs and critically engaged with so students can, one, engage with their beliefs about learning and teaching, but also what they're learning and help them translate that into their emerging identities as teachers.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. I think very good answer. So you're saying that teachers or employers of educators should approach a more holistic approach in language, right? Rather
Correct.
than focusing on their the technicalities of language. Well, we must also approach the holistic way, how we engage with culture, how we engage with practices instead of just the language itself. Thank you so much, sir.
Correct. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for that question. And thank you so much, Dr. Curtis, for that very informative explanation. So now let's move on to another questions from our participants. So we have here Eugene Kabatingan.
Yes, hello, good morning.
Hello.
So my question is kind of situational. So let's say, for example, a Filipino teacher working with American students in a foreign country. The question is, how can you avoid imposing your own cultural beliefs and biases on your students? Like, what teaching styles or methods would you use to ensure a culturally sensitive and inclusive learning environment?
I mean, one of the first things is just kind of taking a needs analysis. Where are your students coming from? Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. But what I'm saying is take a needs analysis. Where are your students coming from? Are they, um, you know, do where are they coming from in terms of a language level? But also like their background. What are they there for besides just because they're told to in some cases, right? What is their cultural background? I'm going to say just stick to the Philippines because this is where the event is, but where in the Philippines? What island are they from in the Philippines? Or what city in the Philippines are they from? And that could have different ramifications of their own unique culture. And you can even begin to have more of these in the initial weeks, fostering this community of cultural understanding by just having them understand their having them share their culture and while learning the language. This could be one way, right? Because one of the things is acknowledging students' voices and their repertoires and cultural backgrounds. So this could be a beginning to foster that. And you just carry that all. It doesn't have to be every activity. One activity for the lesson, and then you go on to the main language lesson. That would be sufficient, right? But as long as it's ongoing, right, to foster that support. Because think you're a curator as a teacher. Just like a museum, you hang pictures on the wall, right? You're intentional within your classroom. And with the activities kind of being the living art you have your learners engaged. So be that curator. So if you want to be aware of maybe your cultural biases, think about what do you value in your classroom? What is your teaching philosophy? Can you say it clearly to your students? If not, write it down, try it out. And just making it clear because transparency is a big part of it as well. I hope that helps. It's not a perfect answer, but I do think it's a one to start considering.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eugene and Dr. Curtis, for that very enlightening explanation. So we love seeing many people raising their hands. However, due to time constraint, we will now limit to our last question from the audience. So we have here Miss Molos for our final question.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Am I audible po ba or not? I
You
am,
are. I
okay.
hear you. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. Curtis. Magandang umaga. So, for my question, sir, I would like to ask, since I've also learned foreign languages as well since my first year and now in my third year, and now that I've heard a perspective of a teacher in teaching a language, I realize that you do have your own hardships, sir, in adjusting your strategies in teaching the students, sir. And with that, do you think, in the students' perspectives, or should the students also have their own initiatives? Should do their own initiatives in learning a language, or should the students solely depend on the initiatives of the teacher in learning a language? And if you think, sir, that the students should also have their initiatives, what do you advise them to do to efficiently and effectively learn a language?
That's a great question. And I do think it both have to work together to learn the language. The teacher is a facilitator. They help guide the students on how they can learn the language effectively through guided practice. But the students need to also take an active role as well, where, yeah, there's homework, but helping them attach what's meaningful besides why am I learning this, or how can I make this meaningful for me, first off, beyond I'm taking this because I have to by the government, or because my parents say to, so, or because of X, right? Why am I sticking with it? The other is finding available resources. This could be using a language app to supplement vocabulary learning, like Anki flashcards that uses space-time repetition, or Duolingo if you just want something fast, right, to help remember some of the vocabulary items, or setting an external goal for yourself, or for, as a learner, setting an external goal. Say, I really want to achieve this level of language by so and so date, and I'm going to study for this test and try and achieve that by so and so date. So you're studying some vocabulary on your own while also learning a little bit through the classroom, right? So finding a means to make it meaningful for the learner and helping them kind of see that. And the teacher can help with this process as well by providing external resources for them. So I hope that helps. For everyone that I can't answer your questions for, I saw Othman Banawi just got online. He's a good friend of mine, and he has a very riveting talk. Um, this is, oops, this is my email. If you would like to get in contact with me, I'm happy to answer your questions. I might be a little slow. I just took up this new position here in China. Um, you can also reach me, read my work on ResearchGate on Google Scholar. I try to make my work publicly available as I value the post print pledge. If you can't get hold of something, you can email me and I'm happy to share it with you. The TQ one is open access, so it's available there. Um, and thank you all for just having me here. So it's been a great time.
Thank you, Dr. Curtis and Miss Mala. So, your curiosity and engagement truly make this discussion even more meaningful. So, thank you so much, sir, for giving your details for our participants to send their questions to you. So, we really appreciate that, sir. And now, let's give back the floor to Miss Hetalia.
Daghang salamat, Dr. Green-Eneix. Daghang salamat also to our moderator, Ms. Darlene Lames. Another truly insightful discussion. At this point, we'll have the presentation of the Certificate of Recognition to our esteemed speaker as a token of our gratitude. The same citation is presented to Dr. Curtis Green-Eneix for sharing his valuable time as our lecturer during the 5th Ilmu International Lecture Series. Thank you, and now